how you dress, how you behave, how you talk, how you treat people, language you use. Hello everybody, my name is David Wolff and I teach at National Kaohsiung University of Hospitality and Tourism in Kaohsiung, in southern Taiwan. And I'm an American teacher from Chicago. And today I'm going to introduce my school and my department. Taiwan wasn't my first choice to come to. So I'm from Chicago, like I said earlier, and I worked for a couple years in Chicago with some refugees from Vietnam. And so I had a lot of friends from Vietnam. And I originally wanted to go there. But after I worked there, then I went back to school to get my master's degree. And I was going to be a teacher in America. But I wanted to see the world first, so I wanted to go to Vietnam. But at that time, I had a lot of student loans, which I think a lot of students these days have, and I needed to pay them back. So I decided that Vietnam wasn't the best place because while you could get jobs and you could make some money to live on, you really couldn't make enough to save and then send back to pay back the banks. So at that time, I also had a good friend that I grew up with who was from Chicago also, and he had been living in Taiwan for maybe 2 years already. And he said, well, come on over to Taiwan. So I thought, okay, sure, why not? So I moved to Taipei and I lived there with him, and I taught in a cram school, Bushiban, and I liked Taiwan. So I decided to stick around a little bit. I guess my first impression of Taiwan is that the people were very friendly, and the food was really good, and the scenery is very beautiful. And the language and culture are very interesting for me, very, very different from what I grew up with. And so that was very attractive for me. Some not so nice impressions, I suppose, were that the traffic was a little bit crazy, and going to do things without having Chinese was troublesome. At that time, I didn't speak any Chinese. I didn't learn any Chinese before I came here. And so in the beginning, it was hard to kind of get by. Again, we're talking about 25 years. That's 25 years ago. So things are different now. I think English is more prevalent now. And yeah, so that's the beginning of why I came here and my first impression, I guess. Actually, the first year, I liked it here and I enjoyed it. But my friend and I, after about 6 months, we took a 2-month trip to Vietnam because I was still interested in Vietnam. And we traveled all over Vietnam just by ourselves. And we had a really good time. And while we were traveling, I also looked for jobs there as well. And there were a couple of international schools that I was interested in trying to get jobs at, but they weren't hiring anybody in my field at that time. So I came back to Taiwan and I decided to give it one more year. But I wanted to change jobs. I didn't particularly like working at the cram school that much, and I didn't like working at night so much. So I looked for a college job or a university job, and I was lucky enough to find one in southern Taiwan. Well, it's a different school, it's a private school. And so I moved down to Kaohsiung, and I started working there, and I really enjoyed teaching there. And I liked the students, and I liked the environment. I like Kaohsiung. It's funny, when I was in Taipei, I told my friends in Taipei that I was going to move down to Kaohsiung, and they said, don't go. And I said, what? Why? And they said, the water's bad, the air is bad, and the people aren't very friendly. And I said, oh, okay. So I was a little bit nervous because I didn't know. I'd only been through there once on the way to Kending. But after I moved there and I was there for a month or two, I said, well, you guys were right about 2 things. I told them, you're right about the air is not good and the water's not good, but actually the people are quite friendly, and in fact, possibly friendlier than the people in Taipei. And so they were not happy to hear that, but they understood. I mean, I think it's true everywhere. In bigger cities, people tend to be more impersonal and not as friendly or caring about other people. In smaller towns, and people are more social and talk to you more. So that's kind of why I went to Kaohsiung and what happened in the beginning. And so I liked it here, there in Kaohsiung. And I also, the first year I was there, I met my wife. So my wife is Taiwanese, and the first maybe month or two after I got to Kaohsiung, I met her. That was one reason why I decided to stay, and she liked it there, and we both like what we do. So we decided to stay, and no regrets there. Yeah. I would say do your homework Again, nowadays it's quite easy to find information online, so there's tons of stuff on the internet. So you can learn quite a lot about the country before you come here. There's no substitute for being here, though. I mean, you're not going to really know what it's like until you come here. But read up as much as you can, first of all. And in fact, Taipei, it's quite easy to live even if you don't speak Chinese. I mean, you don't even have to. You just go to the stores and point at what you want, or go to the 7-Eleven, buy something, and you see the cash register sign telling you how much money it is. So it's not really very complicated. I mean, if you want to get more into the culture and meet people who don't speak English, then you have to learn the language. So obviously, if you can have a little bit of Chinese background before you come, that would be better. Particularly if you're going to study here. I think a lot of foreign students, if they don't have Chinese background, they have to first come and study for a year, I think at least, before they start classes in most programs. Again, if you're joining one of these international English taught programs, then that would be different. You wouldn't necessarily need that. But if you're going to join a local department that may actually have some courses in Chinese, then you definitely need to have a background in Chinese. But again, I just think, read up as much as you can and just be open-minded. I guess that's it. I mean, not too judgmental. A lot of people that have trouble are the people that come here and expect everything to be the way it is back where they're from. And you're in a different country, so you can't expect that. I mean, obviously, there are certain things that are just, baselines where, proper behavior is proper behavior wherever you are. But you just have to be open about things and not judge too much. Well, I guess first of all, in America, you usually, generally speaking, you apply to a school, and then once you get accepted, then you choose your department. There are some schools where they make you choose the department when you're doing your application, but for most schools, you can apply and then just major in whatever you want to major in. Whereas, of course, in Taiwan, you apply to a department, and that's where you are, and it's difficult to transfer. Whereas in America, it's quite easy to transfer departments. I guess another thing would be that in America, for most schools, I would say probably 1/3 of your classes are something you need to major in, and then the other 2/3 are kind of whatever you want to take. Whereas in Taiwan, it's kind of the opposite. It's about 1/3 are general education courses and 2/3 are in your majors, so it's much more focused on the major than in the States. The other thing would be just the way the classes are taught, I guess. America does have a lot of lecture classes, just like Taiwan, but there's more. Particularly if you're in a smaller class, not in like a huge 200-person class, there's more interaction with the teachers. Students are much more active, asking questions, answering questions, and Taiwanese students have changed over the years that I've been here, but they still definitely tend to be quieter than Western students and don't offer up their ideas or even debate each other in class so much. In America, if a student answers a question or says something, another student might disagree with them, and that's fine. I mean, nobody would be upset about that. It's just part of the learning process. But in Taiwan, people generally don't do that. So those are probably the big things. A little bit later, I think perhaps we'll talk about my school, and one of the things we do is we have an internship. So some students go abroad. And so that's one of the things that when they come back from the internship, if they studied overseas in America, Canada, wherever, UK, they'll come back and say, David, we had this class and the teacher asked us questions and everybody argued and debated about things and it was great and I wish we could do that more here. And I kind of laugh. I say, well, I've tried to do things like that, but you guys don't really, you don't really, take the bait and go with it. So part of it is environment. I mean, if you're in a class where everybody's Taiwanese, and they always tell me, oh, well, it's kind of weird to do that here. But I mean, it does help, obviously, if you have students from different cultures or countries in the same class, and then one, they have to use English, and then two, they just have different background experiences to draw from, and that helps a lot. So if you're in a kind of a monocultural situation, it is more difficult. But nonetheless, I mean, if you're in a class, in a major and trying to learn that subject well, then you should be active and energetic. So that's kind of what I tell them. But it's hard. Again, students are much more mature when they come back. They're older, so they tend to be more active in the fourth year. But I guess we'll probably talk more about that later. In the U.S., at least at undergraduate level, the schools are pretty good about pushing students to discuss, debate, problem solve, be creative and innovative in their solutions, things like that. Whereas Taiwan focuses more on kind of cramming knowledge into people and making sure they know all the facts, as it were. I mean, again, that's a generalization. I mean, there are different, different schools, different majors, and different teachers have different ways of approaching things, but that's the general way that things are taught, at least K through 12 in Taiwan and even in university. Again, one of the other differences that I didn't mention that's quite different is that in the US, students spend a little bit of time in class and then a lot of time out of class doing homework or preparing things. And in Taiwan, it's the opposite. Again, we have 30 plus hours of class every week, and then obviously not as much time to do homework, things like that. So that's very different. So I think, I try to kind of do a little bit of balance of both. I try to do, as much, presentation of knowledge and stimulating them to learn the basics, foundation of what they need, and then also kind of push them to do some critical thinking and problem solving, case studies, things like that. And so I try to do a little bit of both. I think they both have their strengths and weaknesses. Again, from my own experience, actually, in graduate school, I felt, and I did my master's degree in America, and I thought that our school was almost too much on the problem solving and the discussion aspect, and not enough on knowing the general knowledge. So I think sometimes in America you can go too far that way. I mean, you do need to know some basic information and facts and dates and things like that. So you need a little bit of both. Yeah, well, I would say you've made good choices in your life so far. So, I don't really have any major regrets. I'm certainly happy that I'm here. I'm happy that I stayed and got married and have a son here and work at the school I'm at. There's no regrets there. I guess the only thing I would say is if I had taken a course in Chinese perhaps when I was in college before I came here, that might have been a little bit helpful, but not a huge help. More so, I would just say that I've been here so long. I wish my Chinese was even better than it is now. So while I have enough to get by and talk to people and do things, if I had worked harder earlier, that would have been better for me. I feel quite integrated into society now, more or less. So I don't have any problems that way. But obviously, the earlier and stronger my Chinese would have been, it would be better. But no big regrets. I'm pretty happy with the way things out. You can't really change the past anyway, so it's it's better to look for the future, right? I brought a teaching prop here. Can you see this? Yeah. All right. So this is my school. It's National Kaohsiung University of Hospitality and Tourism. So a lot of people will say NKUHT, but that's a bit cumbersome to say. So normally we just shorten it to NKUT, NKUT. So I've been at NKUT for about 20 years, and I teach in the Applied English department. Don't ask me about the origin of this picture. It's kind of strange, I think. I like the colors, but the two people on the sides are kind of strange. But anyway, I teach in the Applied English department. So again, that's something that's different from the US as well. We have language departments, but they're more focused on literature, writing, things like that, whereas in Taiwan and some other countries in Asia, they have applied English where it's more practical. So it's been 20 years. Our department is not that old. We're only about 10 or 12 years old. Well, we're very different from most universities in Taiwan. First of all, we're a technical university, so we focus on hospitality and tourism. So we have a hotel management department, tourism management, food and beverage, airline service, baking and management, Western culinary, things like that. But we do also have other departments, such as the Applied English, Applied Japanese departments. So what makes us special is that we're focused on vocational things, work-related things. So we teach, at least in our department, we teach English, but we also teach hotel, tourism-related things, F&B-related things. And so that's quite special. Our school is famous for having uniforms. I mean, that's kind of why I'm dressed up today a little bit, because our students have to wear uniforms to school. And I don't think there's any other universities in Taiwan that do that. So again, there's a reason for that. Again, a lot of the jobs that they might be graduating and going into require uniforms. So we want to kind of train them to have a professional attitude, professional way of going about themselves. So we promote that. And again, when I'm teaching, I usually dress like this as well. So uniforms is one thing. Two, we have something called work education, which sounds very terrible, but it basically means the students are expected to help maintain the campus. So they do some sweeping duty in the mornings, mostly when they're freshmen now. And so again, it's to try to get them to feel a connection with the school, part of the school, to create a mindset that we're all in this together, that kind of mentality. So they have that. And other schools have started to copy us as well. So that's kind of interesting, I think. And the third thing is students are required to live in the dorm for the first year. And I don't think every school in Taiwan does that, just because of dorm space. Usually there's not enough, but in our school there's definitely enough space for everybody. So everybody has to live in a dorm for the first year. And there is a curfew, which again, not all schools have. So they have a curfew. I can't remember what it is. It might be 11 or something like that at night. So students don't really like that so much. So most students move off campus second year because they're more free. That's another thing. The other thing would be, again, our school is kind of strict, so we take attendance, which again is not common at most universities. Again, because we have smaller classes, and so we take attendance, so students are supposed to go to school, go to classes, things like that. And I guess the other big difference would be that we have a one-year internship for the junior year, whereas most general schools don't have an internship. They may have something like a study abroad program or something like that for one semester. Other technical or vocational universities possibly have 2 to 4 month internships, sometimes longer, I think. But ours is a whole year, so that's quite different. So they study 2 years at our school, then they go somewhere in Taiwan to work for a year in their related industry to what they're studying, or they go abroad. And then they come back for the senior year. So we call that the sandwich style education. So there's something between, internship between. So those are probably the main things that our school is special. Okay, I guess I should stick to my department, applied English. Most of our students go to hotels and restaurants. Occasionally they go to travel agencies, but not often. And they also go to airline companies as well. And so a lot of them go to Taipei. And I would say our department, about half the students do that. And the other half of the students will go abroad. And going abroad, we encourage students to go abroad if they can. Obviously, for most of the overseas internships, it's quite expensive to do that. So if the students can't afford to do that, we understand that. There is one option if students want to do it, if they just want to work internship and they don't have a lot of money, and that's Singapore. But the choices in what you can do are somewhat limited. So it's 12 months of work, so they can get a lot of work experience and make some money, and they don't have to spend a lot except just the initial airfare, which is pretty cheap. They work in hotels, and often they work in food and beverage. So if they're interested in that, that's great. If they want to do front desk type things, like a concierge, a bell, a reservation clerk, an operator, our students do get those jobs, but they're harder to get. Those are much more competitive, and the requirements are very strict. So the really good students can get those. And I'm teaching the seniors right now. And my students last year, there was one student who was a bartender in Singapore, one student was an operator, another student worked at the front desk. So they do get those jobs, but more of them would be F&B. So if you're not interested in F&B, then Singapore is a more difficult choice because you can't be guaranteed that you're going to get an FO position. The other internships that we have are Australia, UK, Canada, USA, Holland, Thailand, Korea, Japan even. And most of those are 4 to 6 months study and 4 to 6 months work. So you do both. So the study portion is kind of expensive, but then the work portion makes up for that a little bit. It still definitely costs money to do that. So there are still students that can't afford to do that, and we understand that. There is some scholarship money available for that, but that often depends on the government, and every year it's different. Depends on how the economy is going. But we do encourage students to do that. So in my current group, I had about half the people go abroad last year, and they were quite happy they did. I don't think anybody has any big regrets about that. They learned a lot, made a lot of good friends, learned a lot about different cultures, met lots of students from all over the world at their program, so they were quite happy with that. Yeah. I like the school. I think the school cares about the students, cares about their learning environment, and does the best. I think we provide pretty good resources for the students. The facilities are quite nice. All the departments have very nice, professionalized rooms and facilities to help students learn. I think the teachers are all very good too. And I think we offer up, again, these good work internship opportunities. Again, I think as we tell all our students, not everything is going to be perfect in your work internship, but even the bad experiences are good experiences because you learn something. So even if you have a really bad boss or something unfair happens to you, you get blamed or scolded for something that wasn't your fault. It's a learning opportunity. You learn that these kind of things happen. One, you learn how to handle it, and then hopefully you remember that. So later on, when you're a boss, you won't do the same kind of thing. Or when you're a customer, you won't do that when you're a customer. A lot of my students tell me when they come back from working, they say, "Oh wow, I met so many horrible customers, guests or whatever, that now when I go places, I'm much more polite to the servers." And I say, "Oh, that's good." So I like that. We offer a lot of opportunities for students to learn things like that. And particularly my department, I think is quite nice. Everybody gets along very well in our department. And we all help each other out, and very supportive of each other, and care about each other and care about the students. So I think we just, one of the things we always talk about at our school, I'm not sure if other schools do this or not, but we always talk about the NCUT family, or the Applied English family. So we all feel like we're a big extended family at our school, and then also in our department as well. So I think just everybody, at least in our department, gets along very well, and I'm very happy to be there. I never really considered trying to move to another school. Some teachers move around, but we definitely get more teachers trying to come into our school than leave our school. I haven't seen too many teachers leave our school, except to retire. So it's a quite nice place to work. Very happy there. We have about half our classes focus on English-related things, and the other half are hospitality and tourism. So, which is, I think, different from a lot of other applied English departments around Taiwan. We obviously, have a lot of, speaking, listening, reading, writing classes in English. Some of them are general, but we always try to have a bit of a focus on hospitality and tourism in those classes as well, just to give them even more opportunity to learn professional content knowledge, but also learn professional language as well. Even students who have quite good English, because they're young and not as experienced, they may not have the proper kind of professional language skills, and we try to help them learn those kind of things. So one of the big things is just to be a professional service provider. So again, knowing what that means, how you dress, how you behave, how you talk, how you treat people, the language you use, things like that. We try to help students with that, and then with that, along with that, the hospitality and tourism knowledge as well, and then of course English knowledge. We have a lot of writing courses and speaking courses that help students develop those skills, and I guess cross-cultural understanding as well. So we have a lot of courses where, and I myself, as a foreign person in Taiwan, I share with students a lot of my own experience of traveling, or just American cultural differences from Taiwan, just so that to give them a sense of other countries. When I first started working at the school 20 years ago, not so many students travel abroad, but nowadays a lot of students are traveling abroad, so they have more background knowledge or experience like that. But for students who don't, I think it's quite helpful for them to learn more about other cultures and countries before they even travel. So I think those are the main things that we try to, professionalism, what it means to be a professional, what it means to give service, to provide service, improve their English, general English, professional related English, and of course the content areas of hospitality and tourism. So I think we do a lot of different things. It depends on the teacher, it depends on the class, right? So some classes I think are more lecture focused. I don't usually teach those kinds of classes. I have in the past. the more content classes, I try to do a mixture. This is primarily an English class, but it's a content-focused English class, so I try to do both. I teach a lot of hotel English and airline English, and I also teach them about the professional content knowledge. So I'll do a lot of role plays. I'll give them situations to discuss and to figure out the best answer I'll give them a report project perhaps where they have to investigate an airline or a hotel and come back and give a report, a presentation about that. I'll have them do discussions. I'll have them read articles. So in this current class I'm teaching, I found an article about a guy, an Italian man who moved to England, is working at a really, really expensive hotel, and he talked about his experience and being a concierge and what that means. And so we discussed what it means. And so again, there was some English, we talked about vocabulary, a little bit of grammar, things like that. But we also talked even more so just about the content, about what, how he learned his job, what he does for his job, how to be a good concierge and what that means, and how to be a good professional hotel worker. And so we did that. So I think a lot of teachers do things like that. I think recently the Ministry of Education is promoting more critical thinking, problem solving, case study, things like that. So I try to do some of that in my classes, depending on, again, it depends on what the class is. When we talked earlier about difference between Western and Taiwanese education style, I mean, that's some of that's more coming from the West, I think. And I think that's a good thing. And I think more and more teachers are doing that. I mean, I do know some teachers still do a lot of lecture. Everybody has their own style of teaching, and that's fine. So we just try to make it very interactive, try to get the students involved as much as possible. I tend to teach more conversational classes where they're required to speak more. If I do a more reading or content-intensive class, then I'll have less of that, but I won't lecture too much. I mean, I won't go more than half the class of lecture. At least half the class will be some kind of group project, discussion, debate, case study, something like that. So we try to get the students, active and talking, not passive. I think it depends on the person. I mean, I would never tell somebody what to do. Well, there's two problems there, right? One is parents kind of pushing a student a certain way to study a certain thing, and then two, should you study a language or not study a language? Is it practical to study a language or not? So there's two things happening there. So I guess I'll focus on the second one. I work in the English department, so I have to say that it's a reasonable choice, obviously. So, I think if people decide it's not for them, that's fine. I've had students that come to the department and decide, well, this is not what I thought it was, or I'm here because of my parents or whatever. And I say, well, you can transfer it. Go ahead, give it a try. I think people should do what they want to do, but I think it's useful and practical. We help students improve their English. If somebody has really, really good English, or somebody is fluent in English, then perhaps it's not the best program for them. Because again, we are an English department, so we do have English classes. Although it is harder to practice your speaking and writing on your own. So again, we do have at least 5 or 6 writing classes, so you'll definitely get challenged and learn something in those classes that you wouldn't be able to do on your own. But again, we also have the other classes that are professional content classes, and even the English classes that are focused on the content. And as I talked about before, learning the more formal or professional way to answer people. I'll give you just a very basic, very simple example. Even something like the word okay. It's something that everybody says now. I mean, I say it as well. And I've told the students that we've had so much feedback from the managers of the hotels that they don't like that, and they don't want their staff members to say that, especially in the 5-star hotels. And so I keep kind of drilling that into the student's head. And whenever they do an activity, or whenever they do a presentation, or whenever they do an oral test with me, I'll remind them that they use the word okay X number of times, and they have to try to kind of cut that out. If you're talking to a customer in a 5-star hotel, at least in Taiwan, the managers hate that. So it's hard to train yourself out of doing that. I think the most classic thing would be to say certainly, certainly. So that would be that's usually my best answer for students. You can say certainly, certainly sir, certainly ma'am, certainly madam, something like that. You could say yes, you could say sure, but sure is getting close to okay. So I always tell them certainly, certainly. of course, is another option, but again, that's a bit more informal as well. Yes, sir, yes, ma'am, that would be okay too. So that's a really, really simple, basic example of just a professional knowledge that students don't even think about. And again, they use that kind of language so much in their daily lives, it's hard for them to kind of not use that. And again, a lot of the students kind of realize more of that when they come back from the internship, particularly if they've worked in a five-star hotel or they come back from abroad. They know they're easier to teach, or it's easier to discuss certain things, which I think is one of the advantages of our sandwich education system. For example, I taught an intercultural communication class, business communication class, once to the sophomores. And a lot of it is related to work situations. And some of them had jobs in restaurants or even hotels or coffee shops, something like that, but a lot of them hadn't. So oftentimes we talk about a situation and they just have nothing to draw on, nothing to say. You can say, well, imagine. It's harder to do that sometimes. So then I taught a similar class to the seniors, and they were able to really kind of talk about what they experienced and share. And so they realized, daily life conversational fluency in English is very different from professional fluency in English. So I think that's something to think about. Again, I think if you're, for our particular department, I guess if you want a number, I would say that it would be better if you had a kind of a TOEIC of at least 600 to start with to get into our department. If you're lower than that, you may not get accepted, and then also you're going to really struggle in some of the classes. They're going to be hard for you. At the same time, if your TOEIC is really, really high, if you're, like I say, fluent, if you have like a 950 or something, we have students like that, and it depends upon the student. Obviously, some of the more basic freshman English classes are easier for them, but some of the more professional classes aren't, because again, it's professional knowledge. And a lot of it depends upon the student and the student's attitude. So if you're there because your parents push you there, or you're there because your test score puts you there, then your motivation is going to be lower. But if you're there because you want to learn things and you're active and you want to learn about hospitality and tourism and you have a service mentality, then I think you can still learn a lot. So it really depends on the student. I mean, I think I wouldn't say that you should never study a four-year language degree. I think it depends on who you are and what you want. Well, students who have an interest in helping people, serving people. So if you like to help people, if you like to serve people, if you like to solve problems, that's good. If you're a very quiet, shy person, you're going to have trouble in our department, in our school. Now, having said that, there are jobs in hospitality and tourism that are in the administrative offices, things like personnel, things like accounting, things like that. So there are jobs you could do if you're not such a people person or an outgoing person, and we have students like that, and that's fine. But I think if you're more outgoing, more talkative, that would help. Being curious is good. Having questions is good. You can't be afraid of hard work. I mean, I think I saw a news report recently where it said Taiwan is probably the second or third most stressed country in the world and related to work. And I'm not sure what people think about that. I mean, I think for me, I think I definitely feel more stressed now than I did 20 years ago. I mean, there's a lot more requirements from the Ministry of Education in our school than we had 20 years ago. 20 years ago, we were kind of just left alone to do whatever you want to do. Now there's lots of paperwork and things we have to take care of. But I think somebody who's not afraid to work hard. So I think students who are curious, students who would like to serve people, help people, who are not afraid of hard work, students who have a bit, maybe I should say, thicker skin, because when you're working in hospitality and tourism, you're going to meet people who are not very nice, either your coworker or even the customer, the guest, passenger, or whatever, and you have to be able to deal with that person. So that's hard for some people, and that's something you have to think about. But I think that's a good skill to have in life. I mean, not everybody is a nice person, is going to treat you fairly or well. So I think having the work experience from our school and teaching and learning some of the classes, service management classes, conflict resolution, things like that. Those are good things to learn about in practice. I guess I just enjoy teaching the students. I like teaching the students. I like seeing them succeed. One is just graduating. And two, because I'm an advisor, I've been an advisor. Our school, that's again another different thing for our schools. A lot of schools that you change advisors every semester, every year. Our school is, we get them when they're freshmen and I take care of them through 4 years. So you get to know them fairly well. I don't know all of them really, really well because it depends on the student. Some students are more communicative, more talkative with me than others, but for many of them I know them quite well and just kind of see them grow and mature over the 4 years. I feel very satisfied and having a sense of achievement that they've learned well and they graduate and they can, sky's the limit, they can do whatever they want to do. So that's quite nice to see. I mean, I'm very happy whenever they graduate. I feel good for them and I'm very happy for them and their families. Some of the students, they're the first person in the family that's gone to university, so it's very exciting for their families and I think it's great. For me personally, I guess I can also say that when I first started at the school, we were a 2-year college, so junior college. So we've grown as well over the past 20 plus years. So we've gone from a 2-year school to a 4-year school to a university. And when I first started, I just had a master's degree, and because that's all you need for a junior college job. But during this time, I've also gone back to school as well. So as I was teaching, I was also studying. So I went back and got my PhD. So now I feel very well qualified and very happy about that as well. So those are things that feel very good about. Yeah, that's an interesting question. Well, my son is a 3rd-year junior high school student now, so it's going to be happening sooner rather than later. So obviously we want him to study hard in all his subjects now so he can have more choices. Right? If you go to a general school, a general high school, you can study more things. You have more options to study. So I would support him whatever he wants to do. I mean, in terms of study, to be honest, if he wants to study whatever subject, I don't really care. Although I will give him advice about it, and I will, I might suggest certain things or let him know, okay, if you do this, then this is what's going to happen, or this is what the choices you'll have. I'll give him my advice. But if he really insists on doing something, I'll let him give it a try and see what happens. Again, coming from the States, for my university, I went to what's called a liberal arts college. So for my undergraduate degree, I studied history. And in America, when you study history or English or philosophy, it doesn't necessarily, I mean, you do think about your future career in a sense. I did at that time think I was probably going to go in to be a history teacher in high school or college, something like that, but I wasn't 100% sure. But we often don't think about that so much. So we have a lot of these kind of schools. Taiwan has less of that. So people are definitely more focused on how the school is going to prepare you for your future career. And that kind of idea is happening in America now as well. I mean, schools are kind of being treated as a preparation for work now, more so than they were when I was a student. I mean, that was a long time ago. But I would hope he would do something a little bit more practical or something where he could, there's a clear path to employment, I guess. And luckily he seems to be interested in computers right now, and I think that's a reasonable thing to study, computer science or something related to computers. But who knows? I mean, when I was in university, I did pretty well in high school in physics, and I thought, oh, maybe I'll study physics in university. So I took a physics class, and then I realized, oh, this is very different from high school physics, and this is definitely not for me. So again, that's one of the advantages of the U.S. system. You can try something, and then if you find out it's not what you want, you can shift. In Taiwan, you can't do that so easily. So that's kind of a problem here. But so I meet a lot of people in Taiwan that studied something and their job is completely different. what they're doing, which is, again, that's fine. You can find things to do like that, but oftentimes people have to go back and get another degree, a professional degree, to kind of do that, which is okay. Again, that's okay too. So, I guess I would support him what he wants to do, what he wants to study, and hopefully he finds a way. I mean, if he were, interested in something like, dance or the arts, that would be more difficult, because obviously you want your child to be able to support themselves, but somebody who studies dance or art or music, it's harder to see a path to financial independence that way. I mean, obviously people do make it, but you're going down a certain path that may make it harder for you to find a way. But again, I think if people like what they're doing, they're going to find a way to make it work. So even if you were to study art, like I said, I don't mean to say anything bad about the arts. I mean, I think people who study that, and my son studied violin for a few years, and his teacher was very nice, and I think she's very, very happy with her life. So I think that's fine. So as long as it's something you're positive about and you can live with, then that's okay for me. So I'm not going to push him too much in terms of what he actually studies in university, but. Now we are kind of pushing him just to study hard to keep his choices open. The better you do in junior and senior high school, the more choices you have. So, but in general, you should think about what you like to do. Think about what you're interested in doing. Read up on it. Talk to people who are at the school. I mean, obviously, this video, IOH, is a good way to learn a lot about schools. You can hear what teachers say, what other students say. Talk to your 学姐 学长 the students who graduated ahead of you in your school and your department, and ask them for advice about their schools and career paths, things like that. I mean, I think that's a good way to go. Go to different company websites. Go to There's so much online right now to find. It's really not that hard. I mean, but again, the problem is you don't know until you try. So that's one of the hard things about making a decision when you're a high school student. I think I met so many people when I was studying in university that changed their major 2 or 3 times. So, but again, in Taiwan you can't do that. So I think in Taiwan you just got to make a decision and hope for the best. And if it doesn't work out, you can always try to take as many classes in other departments as you can to kind of supplement that. So, I mean, for our department, for example, we have students who actually would probably prefer to be in the tourism management or airline management department, but because they studied in English in their junior high school or high school, they couldn't do that. I think those departments don't always open up spots to those kind of students, so they're studying in our department. So then I just tell them, well, we have courses on those subjects in our department, take those, and then for your elective classes, if you have time, take classes in the other departments. And that's pretty easy to do at our school. So I think even if your major is not, doesn't turn out the way exactly you want it to be, I think that's okay. I think you can work it out by taking other classes and learn a lot of other things. So in other words, just do some research. Talk to people when you're in high school, and you'll find out what you want. So for the interview, we want to know that you, one, know something about our school and know something about our department. So if you can show us that you've done your homework, you know about our school, you know our department, that's good. Second, if you have a plan, that's good too. What do you expect to do over the next 3 or 4 or 5 years? That's good. And third, we would hope that you can show us that you're in some way interested in hospitality and tourism. Why do you want to come to our particular department? Why do you come to our school? So if you can show us that you're interested in some kind of hospitality and tourism related job or field, that would be better. We've had students, it's funny, we've had students come to our interviews and say, well, I'm here because my parents want me to come here. So, okay, that's a good way to sabotage your interview. But and we've had students that tell us they want to be, I don't know, an artist or something, and I was like, well, okay, well, why are you here, right? So again, you need to show us that you're interested in hospitality and tourism, and that you have an interest in serving people, helping people, because that's what it is, right? So those are the things that I would think are the most important. And be enthusiastic, be active. Another, I guess the final thing would be to maybe, and this goes for job interviews as well, when you're trying to get a job as well, to have a question, to ask a question. You know, a lot of students in the interview will say to them at the end, so do you have any questions for us? And they'll say no. And that shows us that you are not really so engaged. You're not really thinking, you're not curious, you're not active. So if you have a question, that would be good. As I mentioned before, our school has some special characteristics, right? So if you do decide to come to our school, you have to, one, be willing to accept that you have to wear a uniform. So if you agree to come to our school and you have a uniform and you are not happy about that, then that's a problem. So again, you have to know that you're going to have to wear a uniform. You have to know that we're going to take attendance. You have to know that there's a work education class. You have to know that you have to live in a dorm, things like that. So those are the kind of the basic things. The other thing is I just hope that the students are very active. Participate in your classes, talk, ask questions, join clubs, join the student association. You can learn a lot of things from those kind of activities. Yesterday we just had a 薪火相传, where the students were sharing their internship experiences to the underclassmen. The seniors were sharing to the freshmen and sophomore about what they did for internships. We focused on the overseas ones. One of the things they talked about was that when you apply for a job, of course the company, just like our school, will ask you, why do you want to come to our company to work? What do you know about our company? Why should we hire you? Things like that. But they'll also ask you, do you have any questions? And they said that it's good to have a question for them. So again, for us, it's good to have a question. And so it's good to be very active. You have to be active in classes and active in the student association. And they also said that the interviewers will say, do you have any work experience? And so if you don't have work experience, that's difficult because you have nothing to talk about. So if you don't, then at least you should have some kind of student association or club experience where you can show that you did some job, you were a leader, you held an activity, you served people in some aspect, and then you can kind of talk about that. So those are things that you should work on. Just try to be active. I would say, get a head start on Japanese if you haven't already started working on your Japanese, because that's something that's very important for our students. So in the past we required Japanese as a second foreign language. Nowadays we've opened it up so you can study French, Spanish, Japanese, and Korean. But if you are sure that you're going to stay in Taiwan for your internship, Japanese is the most useful language to have besides English. So you start working on your Japanese. So that would be good. But I think just be ready, just be energetic, be excited, I should say, about being in our school and learning about hospitality and tourism, and I think you'll be fine. Just I think our students find that having a positive attitude is very helpful. A couple of students asked me, David, why do you smile a lot? I said, well, because I'm happy. And when you smile, other people tend to be more friendly and happier and smile as well. So I think if you go through life as a more negative person, you're going to have more trouble. Some people maybe are happy in their negativity, but that's a rare kind of person. So I think if you're a more positive, happy, optimistic person, you'll have an easier time at our school, you'll have an easier time at work, and things will be probably better for you. Again, I can't promise that, but that's what I believe. So when the school first asked me to do this activity, there was a slight misunderstanding. Initially, I thought we were going to be doing a video of our school, for our school. Most schools have some kind of 5 or 10 minute video that introduces the school to people. And so I thought I was agreeing to do that. so once I figured out that I was doing this, I was like, oh, okay. But I was fine. I'm happy to do it. I didn't have a huge understanding of what IOH was at that time. I do know that one of our students who went to Holland a couple years ago for internship did do a video, and I did watch her video. And so I did know that IOH was a platform that hosted videos for students to talk about their schools or their internship experiences or work experiences. So I did know that, but I didn't really know much else. So then after I agreed to do this, then I went on your website and I looked around, and I did watch a few videos by students and by teachers and by some other people. And I thought, yeah, this is a very good organization. They make very high quality videos, and I think it's very helpful for students, prospective students, high school students, junior high school students, to kind of get a sense of what's happening. I mean, you can always look at some school's website and find out information, but that's going to be kind of the best face of a school, and you're not going to get all your questions answered that way. And you can talk to people, which is a good way to learn. We talked about that earlier. So asking the older classmates. It's hard to say that in English, right? But so it's hard to. It's good to talk to them, but making these kind of videos is very nice, because then you can watch it whenever you want, and you can get different perspectives from people you don't know. And now, I guess, initially it started with students, but it's expanded to quite a few teachers now as well. So I think I feel very happy to do this. And while I was a bit concerned at first, just in terms of preparation, but I think just through my contact with the staff here and the interviews and the questions that they sent me, I felt like, okay, I can do this. It's not going to be as much work as I initially thought it might be. And I think hopefully I've given some useful answers to the questions, and it should help some students kind of get a sense of what our school and what our department is like, and whether or not they want to come. And if they don't, that's fine. I think you should study what you want to, but if they find my video useful, that's great. And if you want to apply, welcome, and good luck to you. So I think IOH is a very good organization, and I'm very happy to have had this experience. It's been great.